Hey, it's Brandon with Retro Archaeology, and I just finished watching You Only Live Twice. I figured I'd change things up a little bit. I'm gonna just sit in the corner of my game room here. It's late that I'm recording this, and we're gonna talk about what was supposed to be Sean Connery's last Bond film. They actually announced during production of this that this would be his last Bond film, but he took a break. We get on Her Majesty's Secret Service next. And then he did come back for Diamonds Are Forever, which I haven't seen in a long time, so I'm excited to revisit that. As I was watching You Only Live Twice, I don't even know if they would put this one on during the Bond marathons, or I just never caught it, because I don't remember anything from this. It was like I was watching this for the first time. Maybe I've seen the Blofeld lair, which is very famous at the end, but I really was watching this for the very first time in my mind. So right off the bat, I have to talk about this VHS cover. I like the You Only Live Twice split. I like the colors, but otherwise, what is this cover? That's not a movie poster. It's Bond making a very weird face. He does have his gun, his Walter PPK, but not a very good cover for You Only Live Twice. On the back, we get Dr. Evil. Oh no, I mean Blofeld. He finally gets revealed, and an actor that I really like, Donald Pleasance, plays him. But let's read the back of the box and get into it, shall we? So, Sean Connery is back as James Bond, and the emphasis is on explosive action in this fifth 007 adventure, set against the lush splendor of Japan and a wicked plot to precipitate World War III. Someone is snatching space capsules out of the sky. The Americans blame the Soviets, who in turn accuse the US, and both sides are gearing up for the ultimate confrontation. Only one man can save the world from the coming catastrophe: Agent 007. But can he act in time? Highlighted by a spectacular set, a missile silo concealed within a dormant volcano, and a sensational air battle between Spectre forces and Bond's autogyro, an amazing plane that can be disassembled to fit into 4 small suitcases. You Only Live Twice is one of the most thrilling Bond films ever made. And it says an action-packed spectacle sure to please any Bond fan. So this is from 1967, the same year that Casino Royale came out as a Bond spoof. And I can't believe how fast they churned out these movies. This being Sean Connery's 5th 007 movie from 1962 to 1967. So they were really averaging basically one of these a year. That's mind-boggling to me when you really think about all that was involved in just filming these movies. Technology in the 60s, way different from now, obviously. And there's a lot of stunts, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of global travel in these movies. I think getting this far into my VHS review of the James Bond series, I'm just impressed of how fast they churn these out. James Bond owned the middle part of the 60s with these big blockbusters. But I was reading the box office numbers started to go down for You Only Live Twice. It wasn't as big a hit as past ones. Goldfinger was the smash success. Thunderball made a ton of money. But apparently the box office started to dip for You Only Live Twice. And maybe it was just, oversaturation of the character. That's a lot in a short period of time. I'm not sure. But I did have a lot of fun with You Only Live Twice. I did have some opinions about how over the top this movie goes, which is a hallmark of the Bond franchise. I don't have a problem with over the topness. In fact, I'll point to another franchise that a lot of people are saying has oversaturated the movie industry, the Fast and the Furious franchise. I love that franchise. I have a blast with it. So I don't have a problem with You Only Live Twice doing some really ridiculous things. But it does feel like a big departure from Dr. No. What I mean by that is Dr. No is a very grounded spy movie. They kind of throw the whole kitchen sink at the audience in You Only Live Twice. And this movie is jam-packed full of words that I probably wouldn't think of in any movie. So let's just go through some of that. We have a sumo wrestling tournament. We have a fake Bond death. We have a head of operations in a submarine. Those things are honestly not that crazy. We'll get into things like piranha kill pond, a secret lair in a volcano, a gyrocopter, I think I might have pronounced that wrong on the back of the box, that leaves Bond completely exposed, and he has 4 other bigger helicopters pursuing and shooting at him, but man, he never gets hit because he must drive that thing or fly that thing really fast. So we get James Bond becomes Japanese in this movie.
An agent of mine, but first, you must become Japanese.
Kenuki. Kenuki. Eyepieces to Hera. Eyepieces to Hera. Katsura. Katsura. Senryo. Senryo.
Why don't you just dye the parts that show?
私たちだけの秘密よ。
Yeah, if you've never seen it, James Bond goes through a Japanese transformation, which consists of him getting a new haircut and some new eyebrows. His accent doesn't change, and he's Japanese for like all of 10 minutes before they gotta cut to a scene and he's got his normal hair and eyes back. So that's very bizarre. James Bond gets married in this. That's something really unique. And James Bond drinks sake. We get another call out to Dom Perignon. Now we're at, I think they drink a 1959.
A Dom Perignon 59, Mr. Fisher. Are you really sure you won't change your mind?
Yeah, I think those are everything crazy. We get a cigarette that shoots a bullet. That's incredible. I actually really like that in this film. I thought that was a really cool gadget. We finally get the reveal of Blofeld.
I am Ernst Stavro Blofeld. They told me you were assassinated in Hong Kong.
Yes, this is my second life.
You only live twice, Mr. Bond.
In all the Sean Connery movies, he's been alluded to. We have the different numbers of Spectre agents, number 2, number 5, whatever it might be. And Blofeld's behind it all. I guess I need to process that this came before Dr. Evil and Austin Powers. I talked about Austin Powers when I talked about the Bond spoof Casino Royale, but I couldn't help but just think of Mike Myers as Dr. Evil when I see Blofeld in this. And that's a me problem. I think that parody has just made Donald Pleasance's portrayal of Blofeld feel very comical. But there was a time, right, where we didn't have Dr. Evil. Many decades, actually. I guess I would love to just know what someone who walked out of the theater, like, what did they think of Blofeld? Did they think he was sinister? Like, he's got a piranha pond.
You will see that my piranha fish get very hungry. They can strip a man to the bone in 30 seconds.
Or did they think he was kind of cartoony? Because even taking Dr. Evil out of it, he's definitely a little cartoony for me in this. So I think all these things come together. It's a very entertaining Bond film. It is a spectacle. There's a lot of action in this movie. But I think a lot of people point to the Roger Moore movies as when the Bond series really started to get goofy. And some people don't like that goofiness. I have fun with it. I had a lot of fun with this movie. But I think my opinion, if somebody were to ask me, when did the Bond movies start to get really silly? You Only Live Twice is kind of the start of that, with all the very weird things that I've named so far. So let's start to dissect this movie a little bit and just some of the things that stood out to me. The title song is sung by Nancy Sinatra. I actually really like Nancy Sinatra's music. I got one of her albums that was a Record Store Day exclusive vinyl just a few months ago. But this theme song's not the greatest. Honestly, it's probably my least favorite Bond theme song so far. And it's something about it just doesn't stick for me as either a Bond song or as a great Nancy Sinatra hit. Because she has some really moody awesome songs in her catalog, but this one was okay. The opening credits were visually cool, like they've always been, but I don't think this is going to be one of my favorite songs. I think it's going to fall kind of lower on the list. Didn't enjoy it as much, wasn't as memorable, wasn't as catchy. That leads me into just the overall score of the movie. Now, Thunderball, I was riding so high on that score. I'm still looking for the vinyl at any record store I go to. Just loved the uniqueness of it. I thought it complemented it being a water movie really well. For about 3/4 of this movie, I'm getting excited that it's a Japan Bond. I think that's a really awesome location in the series so far for us to go to. It feels very unique. So about 3/4 through the movie, I'm kind of thinking to myself, there's no Japanese influence in the score. And that felt like a real missed opportunity. Now, I was pleasantly surprised that by about the last third of the movie, we started to really get some music that had some Japanese tones and instrumentation and stylings that made it feel very exotic and of that location. But it took a while for that to happen. So I think the first half and really like the main motif of this movie that plays during a lot of the action scenes, it just didn't seem to fit the Japan setting as well as I feel like it could have. It's very theatrical and uplifting and bold, but just didn't vibe with me as much as some of the prior soundtracks. So I think the score in You Only Live Twice is not going to be one of my favorites either. There's a really interesting scene where the common score that's part of this movie plays that I did think was a really great shot. It's a shot where Bond is running from all these bad guys chasing after him, and we get like an aerial pullout of the rooftop, and it really follows Bond running away for a long time. I thought this was a really cool shot to pull off, especially in 1967. We're spoiled now with drones and being able to get aerial shots like this in movies and so much more that they can do with green screens and things like that. But in 1967, this felt like a really cool shot. Probably was a helicopter or a crane of some sort, but all the prior Bond films I've watched so far, watching them in order, haven't really had a pullout this far away. A lot of the action's been close quarters, been up on mountains and things like that, or, in gorgeous locations. But this was a really great aerial shot, and it's one that definitely will stick with me when I think about You Only Live Twice. Another thing that I thought was a really big success in this movie is the movie starts with Bond getting fictionally killed, but it's all a setup so that the world thinks James Bond has died. And he keeps coming back from the dead. But this movie just repeatedly tries to kill Bond. He survives so much in this movie, more than any other James Bond movie before it. It feels like every 5 minutes there's a new serious threat to his life. There's so many, I can't even recall them all. But, at one point he gets his hands locked in a plane where the Bond girl jumps out and he's left to, kind of break out of that and prevent the plane from crashing. It does crash, but he survives kind of as a decoy there. There's so many other moments in this where he's getting into really prolonged fight scenes. There's a fight scene early in this movie that is the best Sean Connery fight scene so far. We'll see if Diamonds Are Forever or Never Say Top It, but this is the best hand-to-hand combat movie of any of the Bond films so far. Like, Sean Connery gets really physical in this. There's fights that go on with, like, clubs and flips and throwing into walls for a really long time, and I really liked that. The action was really upped in terms of just Sean Connery's physicality and the physicality of Bond. And he also gets to train like a Japanese ninja. That's something else I forgot to mention earlier. This movie has ninjas. It has both weapon-wielding ninjas, and then they say there's modern ninjas, and it cuts, and it's ninjas training with guns. And they're a huge part of the assault on the Blofeld hideout. But Bond gets to also train with swords and a bow staff, and just a kind of a really unique pivot for the character, even though the whole storyline of him becoming Japanese played really odd for me and just didn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when it just changes 10 minutes later and he's in normal Sean Connery James Bond appearance. As I was watching the opening credits, there was a credit that popped up and it said screenplay by Roald Dahl. That blew my mind. I had to look up some details about it. So Roald Dahl, if you don't know, incredibly famous author, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, BFG, Matilda, countless others that I'm not naming off the top of my head. But yeah, he wrote the screenplay, and really interesting pivot. And, you know, you could argue that this film has a lot of adventure, and, you know, Roald Dahl is a very adventurous writer, very creative writer. So I think we get a little bit of that. I do think this is a really fun screenplay for a James Bond movie. And everything in the Bond universe so far has felt very unique. You know, there's the Caribbean Bond, there's the Russian Bond, there's Goldfinger, the American Bond, the underwater Bond, and now we have the Japanese James Bond. So I do think they've done a really good job from a filmmaking perspective, making these feel very unique. And I really felt that way about You Only Live Twice. This felt like a very different film from the previous four. And it's awesome for me because as I'm watching these in order, I'm getting to kind of like build on the character and build on the previous movie. And the last thing I want is to feel like I'm watching the same spy thriller over and over again. Otherwise, it'll feel like a slog to get through. But I'm really enjoying it because these movies feel very different. I did just think of a couple more ridiculous things that this movie has. It has James Bond with his suction cup hands and knees, and he can scale a rock cliff face into the secret Spectre lair, no problem. Those are some heavy duty suction cups. We also get a car on the road picked up by a moving magnet. That was insane. Never seen that before. Made me think of Brave Little Toaster when they're hiding from the magnet that's trying to pick them up in the junkyard. But that was a really cool scene. Yeah, there's just a lot of like wild things in this movie that you wouldn't expect. It really makes this spectacle of a James Bond movie, which I think would probably become the template for the Roger Moore ones that we have coming in the next decade. But we're getting near the end of the 60s here, and I think they're just continually trying to up the ante. So I had a lot of fun with You Only Live Twice. Not sure where it's going to rank yet. It's got some really ridiculous things, but a lot of that's really fun at the end of the day. The helicopter chase, as goofy as it is, that Bond wouldn't get hit when he's completely exposed from all sides. It's a great use of the classic theme song, and it's just a really good action scene. Especially having Q show up with the helicopter and 4 briefcases. And it's this tiny little thing, but it's got all these great gadgets like missiles and mines that drop and a flamethrower. That's just a really cool moment in the movie. And I think sets the standard for some vehicle gadgets and just really ornate vehicles, which I know we have coming in future Bond films. The last thing I want to talk about is the spacecraft that plays a big role in the movie. It's consuming these other countries' spacecrafts, and it's this big metal cylinder that opens up and eats these other flying objects. and the second I saw it, the only thing I could think of was Space Graboid. If you don't know what a Graboid is, Tremors. And this thing literally looks like a big metal Graboid flying through space. So that's something that I will associate with You Only Live Twice for a long time, is the term Space Graboid. Thank you for watching. We're going to keep rolling with our James Bond 007 adventure. Being that we're now past the halfway point in July, there's no way I'm getting through every Bond film this month that I've dubbed 007 month. So I'm going to carry this into August or carry it beyond that. I might slow the pace of this to watch some other stuff where it's not just Bond. But we're going to keep rolling for the month of July and see how many we get through. I hope you keep watching with this 007 James Bond VHS series. In our next movie, we close out the 60s with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the last Bond film of that decade. Excited to check it out. I've never seen a George Lazenby, never seen that Bond movie at all, so it's going to be a totally new one for me as well.